This lesson is going to be about the division of decimals, and we're going to be covering three ideas. We will be able to divide decimals by whole numbers, divide decimals by other decimals, and divide decimals by multiples of 10. Let's begin by talking about our first objective here, to be able to divide decimals by whole numbers. So it is right here, dividing decimals by whole numbers. To do this, there are two steps. First, you just carry out the division as normally, and then you just remember to place the decimal point in the answer directly above the decimal point in the dividend. So here's our dividend, here's our divisor. Let's go and see what's going to happen here. How many times is 3 going to 4? It goes in once with 1 left over. How many times is 3 going to 12? It goes in 4 times. And now I just bring my decimal place straight up. How many times does 3 go into 8? It goes in twice with 2 remainder. How many times does 3 go into 23? It goes in 7 times with 2 remainder. How many times does 3 go into 27? It goes in 9 times perfectly. So that means our answer is going to be 14.279. Can you now give this question a go for me? Set it up nicely and see how you go. So pause the video and give it a go. All right, so how did you go with this? So let's first begin by setting it up. I'm going to get 4, and I might even do this in red just to keep some nice colors going. So we're going to get 4, and then we'll get 0.0234. Okay, let's go. How many times does 4 go into 0? It doesn't. Carry my decimal place up. How many times is 4 into 0? It doesn't. How many times does 4 go into 2? It doesn't. Carry the 2 across this time. How many times does 4 go into 23? That's going to go in 5 times with 3 left over. How many times does 4 go into 34? Well, that goes 8 times because 8 fours are 32. So I'm going to have 2 left over. I'm going to have to put a 0 here and carry that 2 across. How many times does 4 go into 20? It goes in 5 times. So my answer is going to be 0.00585. And just like that, we have covered our first topic, which is dividing decimals by whole numbers. Let's now move on to our second one, which is dividing decimals by decimals. So there are again 2 steps to this. The first one being multiply by a power of 10 in order to divide by a whole number, and then carry out your division as normally. So if you're given this, what we're first going to do is we're going to change what this is. We're going to multiply it by a power of 10 so that we're dividing by a whole number. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to take this and multiply it by 100, because that's going to move my decimal place 1, 2 across, and that means I'm going to be left with 3 here. Now, whatever I do to this, I'm also going to have to do to this as well. So I'm going to times this by 100. And by doing that, I'm going to move this across. So I'm going to get 6231.6. So these now are going to divide by each other. So what I've done here is I have made sure that my divisor is a whole number. And I've therefore multiplied by something in order to get it as a whole number. And whatever I did to my divisor, I do to my dividend. So I'm doing the same thing there. Okay, so let's now do our division, having done that. So now I've got 3 here and 6231.6, so that there. All right, so now we'll go, how many times does 3 go into 6? 3 goes into 6 twice. How many times does 3 go into 2? It doesn't, so I put a 0 up there and carry my 2 across. How many times does 3 go into 23? That goes in 7 times with 2 left over. How many times does 3 go into 21? That goes in perfectly 7 times. Then I carry my decimal place straight up. How many times does 3 go into 6? That goes in twice. And just like that, I've gotten my answer. Now, let's just look at conceptually what we've done. So we saw that we had a divisor that wasn't a whole number. So we multiplied it by 100, a power of 10, in order to make it a whole number. And whatever I did to my divisor, I must do to my dividend. So I also multiplied it by 100, and then I just carried out my division as normally. Now, the question I want to ask you is, and I'm going to be calling you in and talking to you about this, I want you to tell me, how is this different to when we were multiplying decimals? So when we were multiplying decimals, we did the same thing. We multiplied by powers of 10 in order to get whole numbers. But then we divided our answer in order to undo what we did here. But when we're doing division of decimals, we don't have this step here. Rather, we simply multiplied both of them by powers of 10, but we didn't do anything over here. So why don't we have to do anything here? So the question I'm going to ask you, so I really want you to think about this, is how does the process of dividing decimals differ from multiplying decimals, and why is this the case? So give this a think. Remember, it's important that you just don't memorize the fact that you do this. You need to know why we're doing it. So Think about it. I'm going to ask you that question. Okay, let's now go through our last example here, which is dividing decimals by powers of 10. Now, what we're going to do here is we have 3 steps this time. First, we're going to divide the divisor in order to divide by a single digit. Then we're going to carry out the division, and then we're going to divide by the same power of 10 in step 1. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to divide our divisor in order to divide by a single digit. So that means I'm going to divide 8,000. I'm going to take this and I'm going to divide it by 1,000. Because that's going to go 1, 2, 3. So now I have 8 here. Now I'm going to divide that. I'm not going to change what my dividend is. It's going to stay like that. So now I'm going to perform my division like this. So notice, divide the divisor in order to divide by a single digit, then carry out the division. So now I've just written this down. Let's do this division. How many times does 8 go into 6? It doesn't, so I put 6 up here. I put 0 up there and I carry my 6 across. How many times does 8 go into 67? 8 goes into 67 8 times because 8 8s are 64. And that means I'm going to have 3 left over. How many times does 8 go into 30? That's going to go in 3 times because 8 3s are 24. And that means I'm going to have 6 left over. How many times does 8 go into 64? 8 goes into 64 8 times because 8 8s are 64. And I carry my decimal place straight up. So that means what I've gotten here is 8.38. But this isn't my answer yet. I still need to consider step 3, which says divide by the same power of 10 in step 1. So my power of 10 in step 1 was 1,000. So I'm again going to divide by that. So I'm going to divide this time by 1,000. So the same thing I did in step 1. And that means I'm going to get 0.00838. So what I'm doing is I'm moving my decimal place 3 times. 1, 2, 3. All right, so that is going to be my answer. To conceptualize what we're doing here, this was our original question. We divided our divisor by 1,000 in order to get it to a single digit. And then we divided our answer of that by the same power of 10 over there to get our answer. Again, I want to have a discussion as to why this is the case. I want you to give it some thought, but then I'll gather you all together and I want an answer as to why we are doing this. Why does this give us the answer? So remember, I want an answer to this one. I want you to think about it and maybe even come up with like a little example showing me why. My hint would be, think of fractions here. Think of fractions. So think of how division is related to fractions and how whatever you do to the top, you do to the bottom. And say so too over here. So when you're thinking of your proof for this, I want you to think of those things right there. Okay, so let's just quickly finish off by reviewing what we've done in this lesson. Our learning objectives were to be able to divide decimals by whole numbers. We did that. Next, to be able to divide decimals by other decimals. We did that as well. And finally, to divide decimals by multiples of 10. We did that. So remember, I don't want you just to memorize proofs or memorize, steps. That isn't what maths is about. I want you to think about why we're doing that. And I'll call you in later to have a bit of a chat as to why these things are the case. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to do your exercise and I'll chat to you real soon.